Alright, so we're doing Cubism today. We're going to be going through and I'm going to be explaining to you how all of the things work. So first off, this is Pablo Picasso on the first page. He's one of the most prominent Cubism artists. So basically, the rundown of what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go into the intro and a brief summary, and then I'm going to talk about the influence before Cubism and the key artist in Cubism. And then in the third part, I'm going to talk about key ideas and accomplishments. And then I'm going to go through each one of the key artists and their most prominent Cubism works. And then we're going to wrap it up with a conclusion. So, the beginnings of Cubism was actually a direct result of the aftermath of Pablo Picasso's interesting 1907 Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which is the picture to the right here. And during this time of competitive experimentation between Pablo Picasso and George Braque is when this was created. So we've got some key artists here, and the guy all the way on the left, his name is Paul, and he is the influential artist. So these artists were influenced by Paul. Paul's emphasis on underlying architecture of form. From his work, a new way of thinking was created, and new art was created using multiple vantage points to fracture images into geometric forms. And this is what allowed all these other guys to depict figures in dynamic arrangements where background and foreground were merged together through the shapes. So the other key artists here, we've got Pablo Picasso and George Braque, Ferdinand Ledger, and Juan Gris. So these are some of the key ideas and accomplishments. So first off, abandoned perspective. So artist abandoned perspective, which is basically like a vantage point in the painting or whatever work you're working on. As you can see, this vantage point is looking at the house and the trees, and it's facing from a specific spot. And this had been used since the Renaissance. And then they kind of, along with this, also turned away from realistic modeling figures. So now let's move on to phase one. Cubists explored open form, piercing figures, and objects by letting space flow through them, blending background into foreground, and showing objects from various angles. Some historians have argued that these innovations represent a response to changing the experience of space, movement, and time in modern world. And this first phase was called Analectic Cubism. Now let's move on to the second phase. In the second phase of Cubism, it's the synthetic Cubism, and practitioners explored the use of non-art materials as abstract signs. Their use of newspaper would lead later historians to argue that instead of being concerned above all with the form of the piece, the artists were acutely aware of current events. In phase two, World War One was going on, so that was the event that they were kind of going into there. So our first key artist is Pablo Picasso, and he was born on October 25th, 1881, in Spain. And his father was a professor and a curator who began teaching Picasso to draw at a young age. So his background here kind of helped him develop into what he became. So the middle painting, we already talked about this on an earlier slide, but basically this one's important because the subject matter was nude women, and that's not necessarily unusual, but Picasso had painted the women as prostitutes, and basically he put them in some positions that were like that you just didn't do that at the time. It was kind of scandalous. The second one over here, Ma Jolie, was 1911 to 1912, and this was the first time that an artist had so blatantly used elements of popular culture in a work of high art. Our next artist is Georges Braque, and he was born on May 13th, 1882, in France, and he was a key French painter and co-founder of Cubism. He was born into a family of house painters in a town near Paris that was a popular spot for Impressionist artists. So basically, the background here is that he was all around art from a young age. Both of his parents, and then he lived in the popular spot. So his first piece is Violin and Palette, and that was in 1909. This is an early version of analytic cubism. Braque was experimenting further with shadow spacing by reducing the color palette to neutral browns and grays, then further flatten out space. So that's why you kind of see the neutral colors there taking effect. And then we've got all the way on the right, Houses at l'Esquette in 1908. This one is different because there's no horizon line, no traditional uses of shading to add depth to the objects, so that the houses and the landscape would seem to overlap and occupy the foreground of the picture plane. So he just kind of he skipped some normal things and just kind of did his own thing, and I think it turned out well. So our next artist is Ferdinand Leger, and he was born on February 4th, 1881 in France. He was a French painter, sculptor, and filmmaker, and he was known for his unique Cubism style, which he blended with Cubism and modern industrial themes. So his most prominent work, Three Women, was created in 1921, and he kind of used colorful geometric forms here. However, they were much different from the Fox low relief sculpture effects used in analytic cubism. The shapes that make up the figures and objects, for example, in this one, don't overlap in the foreground, but are used to create an illusion of three-dimensionality, which is the difference between the two there. And our last painter is Juan Gris, and he was born on March 23rd, 1887 in Spain, and he was a pivotal Spanish painter and sculptor in the Cubist movement who spent most of his professional life working in France. Basically, he was another famous painter that turned Cubist, and like some of the other people, but actually all of the other people, he was from a European country. So his most famous painting is Still Life with Open Window, Rue Ravagan, in 1915. So in this work, he combined interior and exterior views through interlocking elements and subtle shifts in the color, including an intense blue that surfaces in the work at the top of the screen, as you can see. Like synthetic cubism, he reintroduces color to the Cubist style. So he's adding color here instead of just the bland neutral ones that we saw earlier on. So this is where we're going to wrap it all up. So all in all, Cubism developed into an innovative movement as it challenged the Renaissance depictions of space style, and it is continued to be used widely in many forms of art by incorporating elements of a collage, popular culture paintings, or experimenting with sculpture. So even today, people are using these things, and they're creating sculptures that may be outside museums, or murals are sometimes painted like this. But at the end here, I just included a quote from Pablo Picasso, and it said, "Everything you can imagine is real." And then these here is the source that I used. Thank you.